Let's explore how to work with video inside Flash, including how to get your video compressed into the appropriate format and then using it on the timeline within a Flash project. Let's start then by talking about the video that we're going to be using. If I load up this video here, you can see it's an MP4 video file. I need to actually convert this into a format that's compatible when working with video in Flash. So I'm going to convert this into either a FLV file or an F4V file. To do this, I'm going to use the Adobe Media Encoder, and all I'm going to do is simply drag my MP4 file into the queue, and you can see that the Media Encoder sets this up, and I can choose an output format, and by default I've got FLV because that's the last one I used. FLV is a slightly older version of Flash Video and F4V is a newer version, so I'm going to use the F4V format. And then for this example, I'm just going to match source attributes, but you can click on that and you can choose to either crop the video down, you can change your preset. Match source attributes will work just fine here though, so I'm just going to click OK. And then lastly, you just need to decide where you're going to save the file. So let's just save this there, and then we'll click play to actually begin encoding the file into an F4V. Now that that's finished, if I come back to my previous folder, you can see that I've got an FLV that I created earlier, but I've also got this F4V. Inside Flash then, let's look at the properties of our stage just by clicking on the stage and looking at the Properties tab, and look at the stage size here. Now this is important because if you just bring in video as is, it's going to probably be too big or too small. So for this example, I'm actually going to set my stage to be the same size as my original video. And if I look at the properties under details, you can see that that was 720 by 540. So I'm going to set my stage to that by 540, and you don't have to do that, it just is going to make it easier for this example. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to set my video up so that it actually plays an intro on my stage, then plays the video, and then plays an outro or an ending. So what I'll do is I'm actually just going to create some text. And with this text I'm just going to type welcome. Look at the properties here, increase the size, and leave it as blue text. That's fine, so we have welcome. And I'd like this to play for roughly 1 second, so we've got 24 frames per second. Let's go to frame 24 and hit F5, and you can see that that text will be on there for 1 second. Next, what I'm going to do is I'd like to insert my video. So I'm going to introduce this on frame 25, so I'll click here and right click, and I'm going to insert blank keyframe. At this point what I'll do is I'll just go to File, Import, Import Video, and I'm going to click Browse, and I'm going to bring in the F4V file that I compressed earlier, so click Open. And then we have a choice. We can either load it as an external video or we can embed it into the file. Embedding is only good if you are bringing in very short files. It's also going to make the size of your file increase, the size of your final SWIF. So there's a huge benefit to keeping the files external, and then it just links that video in. It means it's easier to change the video later on, and you don't have to load the entire video in as soon as you load in the SWIF file. So what I'm going to do is load that in externally, and then click Next. Then you can choose to have a skin, and a skin is essentially just a set of controls that sits on top of the video, allowing the user to play or pause or rewind. For this example, I'm actually going to have my video just play naturally in the timeline, so I'm going to select no skin. You can change this at any time. I'll show you how to do that later. So we're just going to get the video by itself on the stage, and then I'll click Next. Then what I'm going to do is just look through these final notes that I've got here. You can see that it's saying that the video will be located at, and it shows me the video I'm linking in. Relative paths are relative to your SWIF. That means that if my resulting SWIF is here, it's saying that it's noting that the F4V is in the same location as that SWIF file. So you can't later move this file without relinking it. So it's worth noting that the location of that video is very important. It's saying that it's going to create a video component and on the stage, and it's going to be configured for local playback. That's also very important. It talks about the skin and how it's going to be copied to the FLA. In this case, we won't be using a skin, so that's not so important. So let's just click on Finish and see what's happened. If I look in the library, we'll see that we've got this FLV playback component. That is just a link to the external video. If I click on that and go to Properties, we can see that it just gives us some basic symbol properties, how that's being controlled within ActionScript. So that in itself is not the video file, and it's not really the link to the video itself, it's just a set of playback controls. So what we also have is this guy here, which has been placed on the stage. This is the actual link to the video file. And if I click on this and look at the properties, then we see instance of FLV playback, and we have a source that links to that video file. We also have controls like volume and autoplay, alignment and scale mode. This guy does not get placed in the library, so if you delete this, you've lost that link to the video. That's very important. So it's a good idea to import your video on the frame that you want it to start playing at. What I then like to do to keep this more controllable is actually convert this into a symbol. So I'm going to go to Modify, Convert to Symbol, and I'll call this Video Example. Now you can see that this has created that symbol inside my library, and this has really been preserved. So if ever I delete this by accident, now I can bring this symbol back in and place it back on my stage, and all should be good. So let's test this. Let's see what happens when I play this. I'm going to do Control Enter. It's going to build it. We see welcome for 1 second, but it doesn't stop and play the video. It just flashes off and repeats that initial 1 second of welcome. And the reason for that is the video by default, because it's set to autoplay, only exists for as long as it's actually on the stage here. We can see that it's only here for 1 frame. So if I added a few more frames, if I go to frame 60, hit F5, and now play it back, you can see that it starts to play the video for the duration that it exists on the timeline. So in this particular example, I would like this video to play back, and then we'll have a little ending credit, and then it will just repeat. So what I need to do is I need to calculate how long that video is. So if I look at my original video file again, Properties, and go to Details, you can see that it's 14 seconds long, and it's also playing back at 29 frames per second. I'm not too worried about that though. What I'm interested in is the length of the video. So what I need to do is calculate, based on my frame rate for my project, which is 24 frames per second, I can bring up a calculator, and I can do 14 seconds times 24 frames per second. I need to add an additional 336 frames to the timeline from the point where the video starts. So if it starts at frame 25, let's just add 25 frames. It needs to play till frame 361. So let's do that. Let's go all the way to frame 361. See, 361, hit F5, and now that video exists on the timeline for that many frames. So if I Control Enter, get the welcome, the video loads, plays back, he walks off the screen, and then we start again. So now our video exists on the timeline for the correct amount of time. I'm now freed up to add in whatever I want after the video finishes on this timeline. So I can just click here at the end of the timeline. We'll insert a blank keyframe, and let's just, for this example, add some more text, and we'll just write end. and I'd like this to exist on the timeline for an additional second. So we can see that it finishes at frame 362. So we just bring up our calculator and do 362, and we'll add another 24 frames. So 386 will be my end frame. So we'll do 386, F5, and we'll test it. Welcome. The video plays. Walks off the screen, and then we get the end text, and then it starts again. So that's a simple way to embed video into your Flash timeline. We're not using external skins here to control the video playback. This is just a simple way to integrate them into an existing timeline. Now you'll remember that earlier on I converted my video playback here into a symbol, and what's really useful here is I can use, for example, my transform tool. I can change the scale of the video. So I've got control over how that video is scaled. And likewise, I can control where the video is placed. So it doesn't have to occupy the entire stage. You can embed it with other Flash graphics or other animations that are going on at that time. You can fade it in and out, etc. So you have a lot of control here. You can also bring in a second copy of the video if you really wanted to. Play this back. Now we have two instances of the video playing on the timeline. So you have a lot of control, and creating this, converting it into a movie symbol gives you additional control with your video. So that's a simple guide on how to get video into your timeline. Thanks for watching.